when I started thinking I had to write a piece about the World Cup for Prospect, and I thought, in the past there was a sort of mystery about World Cups. You know, I think, well, certainly back to my childhood, you know, we lived on a very meagre ration of football. You know, no internet, no satellite television. What did you know, you know? I mean, you know, if you were lucky, you read maybe World Soccer and you saw it in print, but one had no idea. So teams, moves, players, ways of doing things appeared out of nowhere at the World Cup. And I think now, you know, we've seen it, we've seen so much of it. There's no mystery, it seems, about the football. In fact, most of those footballers are playing, you know, over here or in European leagues all the time. And they all play pretty much modern European style football. Similarly, you know, people didn't used to go to the World Cup. I mean, in 1930, until Argentina actually qualified for the final, you know, nobody went to Argentina. It took 4 months to Uruguay. It took, you know, a month to get from Europe. The Romanians, the French, the Yugoslavs on a boat came over. I mean, even as late as 1954, the South Koreans had such a complicated air flight route, you know, about 17 different flights to get them from war-torn Korea all the way to Switzerland, that they arrived only 9 hours before their game with Hungary, and then were soundly beaten, I think 9 or 10-0. You know, they were small, quaint affairs. I've got this vision of the 1970 World Cup, England-Brazil, which I'm sure you all, you know, have in your head. And if you look behind the goal, there's an advert for John Silver. Do you know, I don't know, did you know John Silver? There was one shop on Carnaby Street. My father used to think was absolutely business, with very Swiss shirts. Can you imagine John Silver, one shop on Carnaby Street, gets the back of the goal for England-Brazil at the World Cup? This is another world. And of course, the preparations for the World Cup, who knew anything till it happened? Who's reporting on that? I mean, 1930, Uruguay have got the first World Cup. Nobody, even in Buenos Aires, they're not reporting on it. 34, things begin to change because Mussolini is in charge, and Mussolini, for the first time, consciously shapes this thing as a political spectacular for an international press. And so the press are invited in large numbers, given free tickets to travel around. But the agenda, it's, you know, as you can imagine, very much under Il Duce's control during 1934. And really, it's actually only as late as 1978 that the organisers of a World Cup have to sort of start thinking that anyone's looking at what they're doing. And the Argentinian junta in 1976 employed Burston Marstella, who are a PR agent most noted for being the PR people for Union Carbide over Bhopal. They also did Philip Morris on Big Tobacco. So the Argentinian junta, they cut their teeth because there are emigre groups all over the world saying you cannot have a World Cup in Argentina while a dirty war is going on. And you know, FIFA didn't want to know, and they held the World Cup, you know, spent a quarter of the state budget, and for a short period bolstered their legitimacy. Things really change for the '86 World Cup, which is due to be held in Colombia. However, Colombia by 1983 has descended into a drugs-fueled, you know, open civil war, and even FIFA realise that you can't keep this under wraps. So in fact, the World Cup is then passed on to Mexico, and as we know, though, the Mexicans and FIFA's friends in the PRI, the ruling party for the previous 50 years, knew how to do this, because they held the Olympics in 1968 in Mexico City, a mere 2 weeks after blood had been spilled all over the city in a series of student and worker riots, very viciously put down. And they proved their worth because there was an enormous earthquake in Mexico in '85. And Televisa, who controlled all broadcasting coming out of Mexico and were obviously linked very closely to the PRI, edited it all out. Now, if you look at the kind of level of coverage, 24-hour news, internet, a changed kind of journalistic culture, think about Beijing 2008. I mean, the amount of coverage on the preparations for Beijing 2008, absolutely gigantic. South Africa 2010, I would argue, has actually had to endure closer scrutiny, a more detailed and aggressive scrutiny than any World Cup or indeed any Olympics hitherto. because South Africa is much more open, obviously, than China. It actually has some kind of internal resistance of critics. It has an active trade union movement and civil society, and people have been able to get in there. So South Africa has had to deal with just an unbelievable amount of critical press. I mean, the best example, which kind of sums up what's been going on at two, the sort of critique that it's been facing, is FIFA announced that it has a plan B, right, in case of natural disaster. Actually, they always have a plan B. You've got to have a plan B if you're an international organisation. So, of course, all it should never have gone to South Africa anyway crew then take that as the opportunity, which is the theme for the next 2 years pretty much of the coverage. The stadiums won't be ready, it never should have gone there, the grass won't grow, they won't get the communications together, etc. Now, as we know, everything is completely ready. I don't think there's any doubt around the core infrastructure, and anyone who was even vaguely familiar with the kind of sharp divisions of the South African economy and the kind of first world nature of a very small section of it will be surprised that that is all going fine. The second is around security. You may remember at the African Nations Cup in Angola earlier this year, the Togolese team are attacked as they travel from Congo into Cabinda. They're shot at by Cabindan rebels, which is a bit of Uganda that wants to break away, etc. So what's the reaction? Phil Brown. Do we remember Phil Brown? Previously in charge at Hull City, and I'm delighted to say no longer, goes on the BBC and freaks out, going, you can't have the World Cup in South Africa. And poor old Danny Jordan, wearily came on television, the man running the World Cup in South Africa, and said, when there was a World Cup in Germany, there was a civil war in Kosovo. Did anybody say the World Cup shouldn't have happened in Germany? Angola is not Africa. Angola is, this is ludicrous. I mean, you may remember, bombs went off in this country, I recall, was it during Euro 96? I think the IRA let a few off actually just before. Did anybody say it shouldn't be here? Security is the other thing, the relentless story about personal security in South Africa. And South Africa's crime rate, it's bad, it's phenomenally bad, as is its murder rate, as is its sexual crime rate. And my feeling about this is, while it is a legitimate concern for people who are thinking, particularly if they've never been to South Africa before, to be thinking about this stuff, what I can't believe in the sporting press particularly is the complete lack of empathy for the people who are on the end of this the other 364 days of the year. I mean, absolutely zero coverage of that, and these crimes overwhelmingly committed against poor South Africans by other poor South Africans. Sexual crimes are overwhelmingly committed against poor South African women, and it's like none of this is registering. So while I think it is, there are places you've got to think about going and not going, just as anywhere else. There are levels of inebriation you shouldn't probably be in certain places, but where isn't that true? Well, that's not going to be true in Brazil. My God, that's true in bits of Hamburg, And Germany was the slickest, safest thing that's ever been run at the World Cup. It also means that I think in the preparation, some of it has not, a lot of stuff that should have been covered a lot more closely has not been covered. For example, the tendering process for the infrastructure of South Africa reveals what, in a way we've known, is that the upper echelons of the ANC and the upper echelons of the business community, there's a lot of kickbacks, there's a lot of corruption, there's a lot of bad planning decisions been made. All of this. Why do they do it? Why do they do it? Why do they want to put on a World Cup? I mean, it's not because they're actually going to make any money out of this. You must, as I'm sure you're all suitably sceptical, none of these things ever make a profit. Ever. Germany 2006 is on time, right? And in fact ahead of schedule, and has an operating profit. But that's discounting all the infrastructural spend. So on the actual running of the gig, they make some money. But other than that, every World Cup loses money. All predictions that have been made in the past by very expensive consultants, I wish I could get the gig myself, that there will be a growth in GDP, that there will be long-term increase in employment, that there will be an increase in wages, None of this comes to pass. Not an iota of evidence anywhere. This is all a myth. Tourism, well, the best one can say is that, all the people who don't come because there's the World Cup, other people come. Again, Germany 2006, centre of Europe, cheap air flights, at the height of Europe's boom, they get a lot of people coming. South Africa was never going to get the 500,000 that they thought they were going to get. They're going to be lucky to get 350,000. So, why do it? And South African politicians know that if you wanted to take the roughly $5 billion that they have spent on this year, maybe $6 billion, something like that, and you wanted to do, the most kind of, rulesy and sensible thing is you build sewage works and you build cheap housing. There's no question of the cost-benefit analysis. But nations, peoples, politicians have got stories to tell. And the World Cup offers the opportunity to tell your story to yourself and to the world like nothing else. And I don't want to be entirely cynical about that, because you can say, okay, this is PR, this is spin, and oh god, of course that's true. But there is a deep urge and need in all cultures to tell your story, and in a globalized world, if you want to speak to the rest of the world, this is it. This is it. I want to talk a little bit about the kind of World Cup messages that have happened in the past, and then think about what kind of World Cup is South Africa 2010 going to be. So, a quick run through all World Cups, categorised roughly. Number one, there are World Cups run by dictatorships. And they are used pretty crudely to bolster domestic and international legitimacy. 1934 under Mussolini in Italy, 1978 under the junta, and then both the Mexican World Cups, 1970 and 1986. The PRI is still very much in charge in those societies, highly authoritarian. Then you've got the coming out parties. The announcement of an achievement of a certain level of socio-economic industrialization or modernization, or your return to the international community after being excluded, usually because you've been beaten in a war. Now, most often the Olympics has functioned in this way. If you think about Seoul 1998, Beijing 2008, it's like, hello, we're here. Similarly, the Mexican 68 Olympics has elements of that. World Cups have tended not to function in that way. I mean, again, Tokyo 64 and Rome 60 announced the return of the defeated Axis powers to the world community. World Cups, however, tend not to fall into that category. The only ones I would say do is 1974 is part of the package in Germany. You've had the 72 Olympics and the 74 West German World Cup, and it announces the normalization of the two Germanys, that there is a stable resolution to the German question, seems to me to be the feel of that. And what's the key game for the Germans beyond the final, which is all a rehash of the war with the Dutch? It's the two Germanys meet for the first time in international competition, East Germany and West Germany. And that, that's the pivotal moment inside Germany for that World Cup. 1930, Uruguay, and we're going to watch a little bit of this now. It's the centenary of Uruguay's independence, and I'm going to come back, I'll talk about that before we get to the film. 1950 is definitely a coming-of-age moment for the Brazilians. After 20 years of super-industrialisation under Vargas, it's time to show beaten by Uruguay in the final, 2-1 in front of 250,000 people. And the country dissolves into an acid bath of self-hatred and recrimination, which is the danger of these moments. 1966 for me has a touch of this, in the sense that 1966 is about England, returning to the fold of global football. I mean, it's old history now, but it has, people still, the 50s and 60s is so the home of football. How could it not have been held here? Britain in its imperial pomp had refused to show at 1930, 34 and 38, despite being offered an all expenses paid berth. I mean, they didn't even go to 1934. That's, you know, they get off being offered free tickets just to go watch, they don't go. All right, I can understand you're not going to get the boat to Montevideo more full year. 38, they finally go before the Second World War, cozying up with the French in the Entente Cordiale. Finally, the home countries actually go and watch the World Cup. 66 then for me I think is very much about England, you know, that is the original football's coming home moment, you know, with Sir Stanley Rouse in charge of FIFA. It's a very Anglo moment in global football. There are then the World Cups that I would see are the rebranding moments. 3 European nations have had a second World Cup. Oh, by the way, 82 Spain is in a way, that's the crowning glory after getting, you know, the transition to democracy after Franco. 3 World Cups that are rebranding exercises. Italy 1990, this is the new Italy, post-industrial, smooth, sleek, technologically advanced, you know, hyper-designer, you think about the stadiums, the way the whole set was dressed. That's very much the message, you know, the soprasso, as they called it in Italy under Craxi, you know, where they convinced themselves that Italy had overtaken Britain to become the 5th largest economy in the world. Ho, 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 as we all found out later what that was about. And, you know, again, if you wanted to read it another way, my God, Italian 90 was a great way into the kind of hidden underbelly of Italian society and the way in which, you know, architecture and construction and money and so on work. France 98, I mean, was really the last and the grandest of Mitterrand's grand projet. You know, the Arch at Défense, the great museums that were built, the National Library, and then they did the World Cup, and they did it in style with a lot of new stadiums. And what is so great about France 98 is that, you know, for once, French society got to take centre stage rather than the French state, you know, because that does not become a celebration of the French stadiums or French infrastructure of the TGV. It becomes a celebration of France's extraordinary and incredibly multi-ethnic team, you know. And again, all spin and cynicism aside, when you've got the son of Algerian immigrants projected on the Arc de Triomphe in the greatest gathering of humanity in France since the liberation, you know, you've got to just say, wow. Germany 2006 is a bit of a rebranding enterprise. I mean, those boys have been playing it very tight for 16 years after reunification, and it was time to party. It was time to just let loose a bit in Germany. And you have to say, you know, given that they had such a young, and really for the Germans, a really exciting team, German public space was more cosmopolitan, more multi-ethnic, more diverse, more carnivalesque than I have ever seen it. I mean, it may seem a small thing, but to see a ethnically German woman walking along with her buggy with a German flag and a Ghanaian flag on it, that is, for any of you who are familiar with, you know, Germany's relationship with the rest of the world, that is a major, major leap, you know, and I kind of almost came to love them. And in fact, I actually was supporting the Germans against the Italians in the semi-final. I have never been there. That was a really, you know, you've got to love the Hun, man, and I now do. Okay, then there have been the FIFA Imperial World Cups, where the agenda has been about taking football to an area where it's been a backwater, semi-professional. It's like, let's enlarge the empire. America, USA, 1994. Korea, Japan, in a way, 2002. I mean, it's a reward to those guys as well for punting up so much money. But that, you know, that's really the agenda going on. Football in Asia, you know, that market is just extraordinarily important, obviously. Then, there are the 3 quaint World Cups, the small World Cups, 54, 58, 62. Europe's in ruins. The Brazilians have blown it in 50. Who's going to host the World Cup? Well, Switzerland 54, Sweden 58. Non-combatants, got some money, reasonable football tradition. That's where the World Cup goes. And Chile 62, I mean, Carlos Ditborn, famously the president of the FA, says, you must give us the World Cup. We have nothing. And if any of you have seen film of Chile 62, I mean, this is a World Cup in 4 stadiums. Just 4 stadiums. I mean, properly ramshackle. I mean, my favourite moment, second favourite moment from the 1958 World Cup is a game in Norrköping, which is a very small town in central Sweden. And along the touchline, the crowds who are all just standing on the touchline are held back by white ropes on little painted white posts. I mean, It's unbelievable. And in 1962, when the Brazilians win, the crowd invades the pitch. The crowd invades the pitch at the World Cup. I mean, that did happen actually in '86, because you've got all the Barra Bravas from Argentina have been sent by the government to Mexico. But just imagine it, the World Cup final, and we actually get to invade the pitch. I mean, this will not happen again. Maybe, God or someone willing it will happen, but these are unrepeatable. And what I love about those World Cups is, in the end, the story was not about Sweden or Switzerland or Chile. They are stages for other people's stories, that everyone had the opportunity to share it. And it's Brazil 58-62, that's the moment where the world suddenly understands and falls in love with Brazilian football, and every myth and every truth we know about Brazilian football, it all begins there. Pelé, Garrincha, all of those guys. And then, 1954, I mean, if you want a moment where a World Cup actually makes a difference, where it's not just a reflection or a symbol, but it actually makes a difference. West Germany winning the '54 World Cup, aside from being just an unbelievable story, given that they get beaten by the Hungarians 8-3 in the first game, and they make it to the final and they beat the Hungarians 3-2, and then the Hungarians they haven't lost a game in 2 years. They reduced England 6-3 at Wembley, 7-1 at Budapest. They just wiped the floor and reinvented football, and the Germans go out and beat them. 2 million people line the railways, from Switzerland to Munich, and it's the moment where, this is the moment Germany's about to rejoin NATO, it's about to allow to have an army. The West German state comes into being, and it's like, here we are, we can have all of those Teutonic, values, but it doesn't have to be in a war. It can be in football. And that is, it's hard to overestimate. I mean, those of you, if you haven't seen The Miracle of Bern, the movie, I mean, it's a mix between kind of German nostalgia cheese and sort of Teutonic magic realism at the same time. And I think it's a fantastic film, All Germans weep when they watch it, and it's just, I weep almost when I watch it. It's great, so do check it out. So that's the spread of types of World Cup. The question, of course, what kind of World Cup will South Africa be? Before we do that, I'm going to shut up for a minute, and I'm just going to show you this 30 World Cup. But it was found in an attic in Montevideo, and Guy Oliver, bless his cotton socks, managed to persuade FIFA to put up the money to have the film. It's been coloured, some of it, and restored, and make this very sweet little movie. Just a bit of background to say, Uruguay in 1930 is booming. It's the 6th richest country in the world by GDP per capita head. It's got a nascent welfare state, it's got a functioning liberal democracy, only one in Latin America. Uruguay, it's known as the Switzerland of Latin America. I mean, man, did they screw it up later on. But in 1930, and Montevideo, you'll see the fantastic Latino modernism, the optimism of it is amazing. And they're amazingly good at football. They've won the 24 and 28 Olympics. And it's 100 years since independence. They celebrate. They pay everybody up, pay up for everyone to come, and they hold the World Cup. And the stadium they built, Estadio Centenario, is in honour of that. So that's the context. That's the first South Africa is far from it. Is it a rebranding exercise or a launch, a kind of coming of age? I don't know about you, but I find, man, it's hard to top Mandela's walk from prison, or his election as the first president of post-apartheid South Africa. I mean, I don't think any World Cup actually can beat those. So I don't think we're a coming out party for South Africa. In fact, South Africa has got its brand pretty focused and honed. It's done this before. Cricket World Cups, Rugby World Cups, 1996. We know the message. It's, democratic miracle, rainbow nation, African regional powerhouse, etc. And I expect we'll have quite a lot more of that in this World Cup from South Africa, and perhaps less about some of the other stories that might be told about life there. So it's not rebranding, it's not coming out. What it probably is in part is a FIFA World Cup, in the sense that FIFA have suddenly actually had to earn their money this time. I mean, in Germany, they show up they get the tickets, they get the check, they sit in the nice seats, they go home. All right? They do virtually nothing. They don't have to do anything. The Germans do it all. South Africa, they've been running an office for 5 years in Joburg, and they've spent probably £500 million on it. So it's very much FIFA's World Cup, and it's about making African football, I would say, safe for their multinational sponsors and corporate agency. And what FIFA has spent an enormous amount of time doing, more than ever before, is dealing with ambush marketing, clearing the streets, so you've got a kind of 1 mile, African signage and food-free zone, so things are safe for McDonald's and Coca-Cola's in the kind of fan zone. And just the madness of the ambush marketing strategy for FIFA is, I don't know if you've come across, I think it's called Kalula, which is an African, it's EasyJet in South Africa, and they've been running adverts which say the unofficial airline of you-know-what, and that is deemed an infringement of trademark. They fought them in South African courts, spent money fighting them in South African courts on that. So it is partly, it's going to be FIFA's, and FIFA are the reason that we're looking at, Table Mountain, not Cape Flats, when we look at Greenpoint Stadium in Cape Town. It was going to be built at Athlone, which is actually where people play football. It's the posh bit of the Cape Flats, and it was already had quite a large stadium there. But of course, we're going to Greenpoint. So the South African agenda and the FIFA agenda, I think, they're pretty minimal, and they're not actually that interesting. But there was going to be one really important agenda at this World Cup, and that was going to be an African World Cup. I mean, from the very beginning, the South Africans, when they won it, FIFA when they awarded it, everyone has said this is Africa's World Cup as well. But in some sense, this is reward for the material fact that Africa is the third nation, the third continent in many ways in global football. Its players are playing in the leading clubs all across the world. It has its own developed, unique, distinct take on football, and it's Africa's turn. And, in contrast with the usual disaster news, this was going to be a celebration of a continent and peoples and cultures. It hasn't worked out like that. I mean, let's take FIFA's video at the, did anybody see the draw, the Cape Town draw in December? They show a video, Africa's World Cup. What do we see? Monuments, large mammals, and people in traditional dress in rural settings. The agenda and the imagery of the tourist industry in the global north. Nowhere do you see urban Africa. But where is football played and loved in Africa? It's played in the cities. Nothing. FIFA decide rightly, really good, have a concert, right? What's the other great non-linguistic thing that the whole world gets into and you can kind of communicate through? Music. Brilliant. What's Africa great at? Music. So you put on a concert. Who do you hand over the management to? The people who did Live Earth. The people who did Live Earth without including any Africans until the last minute. Then they went, oh fuck, you say a tour, you better go on. And what have they come up with? The Black Eyed Peas, Cheryl Cole. I mean, I'm not against, it's got to be a cosmopolitan thing. I understand that they have an audience of idiots in the global north that they need to talk to. But this is ridiculous. Thank God the South African Creative Workers Union did promise A, to storm it, B, to set up an alternative, etc., etc. And there will be a much more South African flavour to the concert on the 10th of June. But not particularly African. Amadou and Miriam are considered safe. But it's like, and that's great, I'm all for Amadou and Miriam, but come on. This is music in Africa? This is ridiculous. No African team. I can't see an African team winning this World Cup either. I mean, that's one of the tragedies for me. I don't think they've got a prayer. They haven't got a prayer. They've got the players, have they got the administrators and the setup? No. I just don't think they've got a chance. The South Africans, I mean, my God, it's going to be fantastic if they make it to the second round. And it's such a tragedy because when you think back to 95, 96, all the unleashed energies of apartheid South African football. They go out and win the African Champions Cup, Orlando Pirates in 95. They win the African Nations Cup. They go to the World Cup in 98. Amazing. What's happened since in the African Nations Cup? Semi-finals, quarter-finals, group stage, don't even qualify. They couldn't even qualify for Angola 2010. The tragedy of South African football, which is an unspoken element of this World Cup, is that it was basically treated like the taxi industry. Off limits. Reforming energies go elsewhere. One of the few areas that black entrepreneurs could operate in apartheid South Africa is football and the taxi industry. So you're going to get a very grey area, you're going to have organised crime, you're going to have an industry that doesn't pay its taxes and that runs itself. All reforming energies, not surprisingly, have been focused on rugby and cricket. I mean, have you seen what's happened to SAFA, right? The World Cup's about to happen in your country. What has SAFA contributed to South African Football Association? Totally paralysed. It's been embroiled in political infighting for 4 years. You know, it can't clean up. I mean, there is so much corruption in Africa, in South African football, I don't even know where to begin. All swept under the carpet. So in that regard, you know, plus you've had, you know, very few Africans can make it to the World Cup for obvious reasons. And, you know, you've had some really serious xenophobic riots in the townships of South Africa. So how much South Africa's many African migrant communities are ready to show their face? I don't know. I hope to be surprised, and I hope that will be a really great element of it. Perhaps the most crucial thing that's been lost in putting on this World Cup, though, is why it all means so much in Africa. I mean, that's the thing. All right, we all love football, we've all got our own traditions and history, but it is super special in Africa. And the bottom line is, in Africa, as nowhere else, football has been allied with nationalist and liberationist politics in a way that it hasn't anywhere else, you know. Where did most, you know, football arrives, it's the baggage of the colonisers. Africans watch, then they play, all right, all over. It's unstoppable, from, you know, the elites of Cairo to schoolboys in Ghana to miners in the Rand at the turn of the 19th century. And they make it their own, you know. It provides a training ground for the first generation of nationalist leaders who are not allowed to actually run anything else. So what do? Look at Albert Luthili from the ANC. Where does he get his training? Running a football club. Farhat Abbas, leader of the FLN, the Algerian independence movement, gets his training running football clubs. Plus, football provides recruiting grounds, places for propaganda, places to organise people, places to hide. Julius Nyerere hides out in football clubs all over pre-independence Tanzania, you know. So all of those things imbue football before independence with immense weight and significance. And above all, it is the place where you can begin to throw off the psychological shackles of imperialism. So Farhat Abbas, the Algerian independence leader, the quote that sums it up for me says, you know, they rule us with guns and machines, but on the field of play where it is 11 men against 11 men, we can show them who is truly superior. And that, in 1,000 languages and 1,000 ways of expressing it, is at the heart of what football means in Africa. You know, and that may be 4 or 5 generations ago, but that lives today in Africa, about why it is so important. And all of that has just been completely, you know, edited out of the story. You wouldn't know that Africa's World Cup had any link to that dimension, profound dimension of African history and African society. So what are we left with? Well, my hope is, I suppose, that maybe we'll get a small World Cup. Maybe we'll get a World Cup that in the end is not South Africa's stage, but it's a stage for someone else. And we will join somebody else's great narrative and somebody else's great story. And I'm going to just leave you on that with a bit of writing from The Ball is Round, from my own favourite World Cup moment of this form, which is the Brazil-Sweden final in 1958, when the world fell in love with Brazilian football. And now I just got to find it in this great bloody tome. I don't really know my way around my own book. It's here somewhere. Okay, I'm closing in. I'm now in the right chapter. Here we go. 29th of June, 1958. Brazil 5, Sweden 2, Rasunda Stadium, Stockholm. And this is a quote from Geoffrey Green, the great football writer at the Times, who was there. And he said, They showed football as a different conception. They killed the white skidding ball as if it were a lump of cotton wool. Didi, floating about mysteriously in midfield, was always the master link, the dynamo setting his attack in motion. And besides Didi, with Vava and Pelé, a piercing double central thrust, they had one man above all the others to turn pumpkins into coaches and mice into men. Garincha, Geoffrey Green. From 1-0 down, after 4 minutes, Brazil are now 4-1 up, and inscribing the field with intricate patterns of interplay so vivid and clear that every contrast, every difference appears sharp and vivid. Surely the gap between these teams, these peoples, is unbridgeable. The Swedes are tall, angular, pale, homogeneous and blonde. The Brazilians are just mixed up, but on the whole, shorter, rounder, darker, blacker. Physiognomy is the least of it. The cold boreal north meets the warm lush tropics, Protestants and strict Lutherans at that face fallen Latino Catholics. The New World and the Old World, advanced and late industrialisers, consensual democracy and febrile populism, Sweden in yellow, Brazil in blue, and football in another register. In Brazil, around the radio, they're cheering anything and everything. Even Sweden's second goal is met with delight. In the final minutes of the game, it is no longer clear who the Swedish crowd are supporting. They chant for the home team when they win occasional possession. But when Garincha dances over and around the ball without touching it, leaving 2 Swedish defenders transfixed on the spot, they cheer. When a Brazilian is down injured and the Swedes play on, they begin to hiss. And when a Swedish winger takes the ball to the goal line and slips over as he attempts to cross, they laugh. A long ball from inside the Brazil half sails through the air towards Pelé. He catches it on his chest and as the ball is dropping to the ground, steps over it, effortlessly executing a backheel pass. The cries of joy are palpable and still rising in a crescendo as the return ball comes back into the penalty area and Pelé, diving away from its trajectory, flicks the ball with the side of his head and inside the post. As the celebrations begin, he lies still on the ground and his team rush to revive him. His body appears heavy, inert, unconscious. The whistle goes and they haul the boy to his feet. Tears, rapture, dizziness and stumbling embraces. The Brazilians take their lap of honour, carrying the large Swedish flag. The straight-backed Swedish king abandons all known protocol and descends to the pitch, lost in the melee of bodies and hugging and weeping. So, some place football like Brazil 58, if we can manage that measure of cosmopolitan love, then some of the bullshit and some of the spin and some of the heartache of World Cup 2010 will be rewarded by the mystery of humanity at play. Let's enjoy the World Cup. Class kids don't play football, so fine. But then you're going to have a very small demographic. Everyone plays football, but not to the point of pursuing it as a kind of career option, at least some of the way, which is the precondition of opening the labour pool, so that you get a bigger choice of people. Yeah, sure, everybody plays it, but actually taking it to the point where you can even begin to think about engaging with the route into the professional game. I think it really narrows. It's like Americans playing, middle-class Americans playing football in, unbelievable numbers, but how many of them, when the crunch comes, are actually pursuing the professional option? It's a very, very small fraction. Where are all the Latinos, who you would expect to be coming through? I mean, that's a whole other thing about America. Football in the US. But you think about it, who's from a middle-class background? Pierre Crouch. He's from a white-collar background. I'm trying to think, is anybody else? Lampard went to a public school, but, where's he from? Where's he from? Where's he from?
Don't start West Ham.
He's from a football family.
Cat left his class and his bloody club as well.
Well, guys, the field's open. What do you want to talk about? The World Cup. Yes.
thoughts are about the World Cup that might be coming here in 2018. Do you think England should get the World Cup, and would you be pleased if we did?
I'd be just beside myself with happiness. I would. Who doesn't want the World Cup? My God, I just absolutely love it. And it might even come to Bristol. Bloody hell.
One of the most evil men in Bristol is sitting in this room, sitting over there with his hand in front of his face. Yeah. He's fighting against on behalf. He drove the train. No. He's fighting on behalf of the people who want to keep hold of the land that's going to be turned into the stadium. Apparently, another stadium. Apparently.
Another stadium.
Ashton Vale. It's a community of about 2,000 people. They've got industrial estates on 3 sides of them. You know, the tobacco buildings and all that sort of stuff. And the 4th side, this strip of land, which is where they want to build a football stadium. And this is their only way out. As well as the industrial estates, there's also a railway line around them. So there's only one road in and one road out of Ashton Vale. And so their way out is through this land. And the paths across it, and they're going to be entirely surrounded.
No, this is not good. Clearly, I don't. You know.
But that's a lot of the story of World Cups and Olympics, isn't it? Land displacements.
Yeah. I mean, Olympics are worse because they stay with World Cups. It's just stadiums are not that many. Often they're rebuilt on old stadium places. I mean, Olympics are really disastrous for that. I mean, whole swathes of Beijing, Athens, and all of that. I mean, on the 2018, I can't decide whether Treisman's comments have completely scuppered it or not, because what Treisman has done is unwittingly, and fuck me, the Daily Mail on Sunday, the most patriotic paper in the country. What are they playing? I mean, no one, it is entrapment as far as I'm concerned. But what he's done is reveal in public what everybody knows, is that global football is very, very bad. Now, whether actually the Spaniards or the Russians have been doing a deal, or people are, global football is bad. The Russian Football Association is very bad. And almost every single person on the FIFA executive, if subject to any kind of meaningful due diligence, would never be allowed an executive post in an international NGO of the kind of significance and weight of FIFA. I mean, I don't even know where to begin how bad all of these people are. And what he's done is put that, unwittingly into the public realm. And, it's like the omerta, isn't it? It's like letting on what everyone's up to. The only thing that's going, what's going for the England bid is the Spain-Portugal bid isn't going to happen because the Portuguese absolutely do not want to know. They want to, so there's like no money. Portuguese government has said not a penny, nothing. And they're already talking about pulling down some of the stadiums that were built for 2004 because 3,000 people in a 38,000 seat stadium, it's not working. So what are the options? Well, Russia's the main big option. The Russians are powerful. They're spending 45 million quid on their bid, which is a lot more than the English bid. And they have a case, and they have a lot of power inside FIFA, and they know who to talk to nicely, which the English FA still don't really. Well, because they're kind of just too straight. That's just not the world they're used to dealing with. I mean, what they can offer is something commercially fantastically successful, and it's a sort of it's a guaranteed hit, big crowds, nice stadiums. I think it's in the balance, actually. I can't read it myself. I mean, I would really like it to happen. I slightly fear for what the FA would actually do with it when they got it. But hey, we can have that argument if they get it. So yeah, that's how I'm feeling.
I just about to answer the stadium thing, that kind of when you talk about 3,000 people in the stadium in Portugal. I mean, what's the capacity of the ground they're going to build for this?
Yeah, they want to build a 30 to 40,000 stadium for a club that averages 12,000.
I know, it's fair, isn't it?
And they want to get rid of Ashton Gate, build what? Supermarket?
Supermarket, and then they're going to get rid of the supermarket, build housing. But this is all because it's greenbelt land, which was bought speculatively 10 years ago. The Liberals came to power and promised that they would not build housing on greenbelts. So you can't develop your greenbelt with housing. You've got to come up with something exceptional. What could be more exceptional than a stadium for a World Cup bid?
And they must have
so
bought
it's
it
a device. They bought it for 800,000.
So who's they?
Lansdowne and John Ponton. They bought the land. They bought the land in bits and pieces gradually over the years. But I mean, the various merchant venturers have bought all the land up to Long Ashton.
Right.
All that green belt has been bought up by a very small number of people who are all trying to push through plans to get it developed. Because you buy it for 800,000, and the value, when they're put together the mass, the stadium, the value they've given for land is 6 million. Because of course, as soon as it's got planning permission, it's worth 6 million.
Yeah.
So it's a device to build on green belts.
Yeah.
And it's a device that will then raise the value of the land, which they can then borrow against to build the stadium.
Right.
But it's all it's all a scam to make a profit on land, because first and foremost, John Ponton's a property developer.
Is he on the board of City?
They have nothing to do with him. It's a merchant venture.
Yeah.
He runs the JT Construction Group and Ben's projects and various other things around Bristol.
You know what it feels like? You know, I live near IKEA. At the weekends and back home, just I can't get out of the end of my road
Yeah.
because you know the stadium has been turned into. It's not even football. It's IKEA. You know, it's very sad.
Do City fans, I mean, I don't know much about this because I don't pay much attention to City fans, but today there's only City fans there. And how much support is there for this move?
It seems a lot from the posts my clients have been getting.
Yeah, they're very pleased.
Or your hate mail?
Yeah.
It pisses me off because they wouldn't let Rovers have any land, any water at all, the local council. I'm sure there were City fans.
Well, they seem to think this is the way of the Premier League. You build a 40,000 seat stadium, 40,000 people will then come.
And then you
because
go
you've
bust.
built it. And then you can offer ticket prices by a great team. Well done, Blackpool.
I've got to say, Blackpool, I feel like Blackpool is Bristol's representative in the Premiership.
Yeah.
How's your Island?
With football's very own verbal fruit machine at the helm.
He's fucking brilliant. I don't know you heard the other week on the Holloway.
Oh, I know.
Did you? I think a couple of weeks ago on Radio 5 before this happened and everything, they had him on, and they like him on because he's got this quaint accent and all these things funny and all that. And he was on there, and they asked him a question about Blackpool. He was talking about Blackpool, about, you know, money and how it all worked, you know, to deal with, dealing with small clubs and small budgets, blah, blah, blah. And then he launched this 5-10 minute rant on Radio 5 about big money in the game, right, and how it was destroying the humanity of the game. And they just let him go. Right? And I've not heard anybody say it for a long time as straightforward as Holloway said it. And he just placed humanity right back in the game. He said, this is what the game is about. This is what it's not about. Right? And we were, you know, it'll never be proper whilst this is in there. It'll never be proper again.
Yeah.
Said, you know, and of course then Blackpool done it, everyone's going, oh, you know, like, it's brilliant and all this, like, it was quite ironic, but he was great. And I've heard Holloway over the years, we know from the Rovers and everything, but what he said was really, really good, so I should find it again.
It's great, it's my highlight of the Premiership season.
Did I survive?
Yes.
Not that, well, I hope this makes sense. What were the sort of politics of Uruguay getting the first World Cup? And what were the politics of England of deciding not to go to any of the early World Cups?
Well, Uruguay, I mean, FIFA in 29 realised that the Olympics is increasingly becoming the World Championship of football. And they've sort of slightly ignored it previous to this because it's been amateur football and amateur players. And again, the English don't play, and it's just sort of not treated very seriously. But by the time you get to 1928, the Argentinians and the Uruguayans are all going, they're all semi-pro, and everyone can see which way the wind is blowing. You know, professionalism is about to come all over the place. I mean, it's only Austria and England at the time, Scotland at the time, but it's coming, so they can see that. And it's a replay in Amsterdam for the final, and 250,000 people apply for tickets for the final. It's like, okay, that sort of sets bells ringing. So the 29 conference, it's like they thought the Germans might do it, but you know, things are a bit sticky in Germany anyway. And the Uruguayans, are ready, there's a political constituency at home amongst the elite that, we're doing great, let's tell the world. It really is boom time, and it turns out it's the 100th anniversary of of the Constitution in 1830, which is sort of the founding moment of Uruguay. And they offer to pay everyone's exits. So it's like, you know, there's no politics there. It's like, thank you very much. We'll go with that. In terms of, I mean, they write to the English FA, and it's in the Ball is Round. There's this absolutely hysterical letter in kind of 1930s legal talk. You know, dear sir, thank you for your letter of the 9th ultimo. We regret to inform you we will not be able to attend. And there's virtually no debate inside the FA. It's just like, you know, what are we doing? This is we play professional, serious football, and we're not bothering with this nonsense. It's total imperial superiority, just not worth bothering with. And in 34, again, well, 34 is slightly clouded by the fact that England played Italy in 1933, slightly chivied there by the Foreign Office, who want to make nice at the time with Mussolini. And Frederick Wall finds the whole thing a thoroughly distasteful affair. Mussolini shows up in the stadium, and the mics boom, you know, we never lose with Il Duce, we will never lose today, and there's coordinated kind of swirling of handkerchiefs, and he finds this all, you know, this very much keep politics out of football brigade at the FA, so they don't want to play in 34. 38, I mean, all the same arguments are raging, but they actually do show up, and they schedule a meeting of the International Football Association Board, which is the rule-making body, and that's already shared between FIFA and the home nations. And they go and they watch, so they sort of inch their way forward.
So if the FA is so keen to keep politics out of football, how come there's that famous picture of the England team doing the Nazi salute when they played?
Because hypocrisy is our middle name. Yeah, I mean, you know, they couldn't keep it out. They couldn't keep it out, and the Foreign Office worries hugely and tries to intervene all over the place. I mean, they're really stuck between a rock and a hard place. You know, they don't know how to play that game, and yeah, it's a shameful and awful episode. You know, I mean, but it's the era of appeasement, and you can imagine the messages that are coming out of Whitehall at the time on these kinds of issues. I mean, there's a great book called Scoring for Britain, which is, I mean, it's a rather dry academic read, but this guy, man, he's so done the work and been through every Foreign Office memo and every single document on how all of this was dealt with. That's the place that, if you really want to do the politics of these things, you know, that's where you've got to go. It's great, it's great. Not maybe bedtime reading. Well, who do we think is going to win? Okay, those for Brazil.
You've got Spain and Italy.
Those for Spain. Oh, okay. And those for others. We've got others. Yes. One for England. Thank you, sir.
Argentina, I think.
Argentina. Okay, very good.
What about Chile?
Well, you know, they've been playing great, actually. They've been playing great, and the Argentinian manager, who is an absolute national hero, they love him. What's the guy who used to coach Argentina? And they were shit with him. I can't remember his name. Maybe. I did mention this to some of you earlier, but I will give you my bet tournament, which is the Golden Boot. You may know, apart from Ronaldo of 2002, I think since 1990, you only need to score 6 goals to get a share of the Golden Boot.
Share?
Yeah, well, because often there's 3 or 4 of them, you know, are on 6 goals. So it's not many goals. 6 is not many. Roque Santa Cruz, Paraguay's striker, is 100-1 for the Golden Boot. But all Paraguay's play, and they're quite good, not Paraguay, goes through Roque Santa Cruz. They've got to play New Zealand, and they're going to play Slovenia or Slovakia. So, let's say he gets 4 or 5 goals, they make it through to the second round, he gets 1 more in the second round before they get knocked out, 100-1, it's got to be worth a fight. So, there's my, you heard it here first. I'm having a tenner, and I'm going to have a £5 side bet on Diego Milito, because that man, did you watch him in the Champions League? 2 shots, 2 goals. You know, he's absolute dynamite at the moment.
That's what he made the first team.
Yes.
Well, it's Slovakia. That's the question. I mean, Maradona's selections are so insane.
Well, he's got six
I think it
forwards
was,
in his squad.
You think?
He's got six forwards in his squad. He's got an amazing.
He's got 6 forwards. So, who knows? You know, I think it's slightly Russian roulette with that team.
So it's about Democratic People's Republic of Korea.
Well, I mean, I think the question is how many people try and do a bunch, surely. That's the bet.
Their families are all locked up, surely.
Most of them play abroad.
They'll take their shoes
Some of them
away.
do play abroad. Some of them are playing. 2 of them play, I think, in Russia. So they you
They're
know.
going to run play there.
I mean, you know, when the Romanians played when they played Barcelona in '86, Steaua Bucharest played Barcelona in '86 in the European Cup, and 200 totally hand-picked folks went to that game. You know, and 86 of them, you know, most of them were members of the Securitate. So, you know, I mean, I don't know about you. If I was a member of the North Korean secret police, I'd be off, mate. Let me out of there. My personal solution to the North Korean crisis is to give the top 500 members of the North Korean elite a platinum American Express card and a condominium in Las Vegas and a kind of annual allowance at all of the casinos. It's just like, give it up, guys. Give it up. Because what does Kim Il-jung do?
Has South Korea ever played North Korea?
They have. There's been a few friendlies and there's been a few World Cup games. So it has happened. It has happened.
And in qualifiers.
Yeah, they play. That's right. So it's it does happen. It doesn't. It usually has to be played somewhere that isn't in Korea, inevitably.
Yeah, but don't the North Koreans print their own dollars?
Oh, for sure. It's the centre of global forgery.
So your plan's already like...
Well, forged dollars in North Korea if you want to buy stuff off the Chinese is okay. But you want to go and gamble at, Caesar's Palace, mate, you're going to have to do better than that. I'm serious. I tell you, it's a lot cheaper. It's a lot cheaper. Whatever the South Korea's military budget is, it can't be as much as that. And if 500 leading cadres of North Korea fucked off to Las Vegas, that's the end. That's the end. That's the end of North Korea.
Might get some food.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, pity the South Koreans will have to go and run the show. But nonetheless, I think they should try it out. Weirder things have happened.
I'm sticking a 10 on Rochester.
Yeah, it's 100 to 1.
Yeah.
100 to 1. New Zealand.
New Zealand, Slovakia, yeah.
It's like...
First time he gets the ball and tries to turn it, Ryan Nelson's going straight for it.
And listen, it's gonna. I mean, how else are you going to get off the Paraguay, New Zealand? That gives a little edge to those group games.
Yeah.
Well, do you hold any hope for England at all?
I don't actually. I don't. I mean, in the end, who is the biz in the side? You've got to have a few people who are really something a bit special. And apart from Wayne at the moment, who is that? Stephen Gerrard has had the worst season, in living memory. He's got the emotional intelligence and behaviour of a 10-year-old. He's a boy man. He's absolutely hopeless. He's got a clue what he's doing. So I don't think the central defence is so creaky these, creaky. The goalkeeper, David, we could be watching David James again. And I love David James, as a human being and as a socially conscious and, literate, footballer. Respect is totally due to David James, but I don't think he's up to a World Cup quarter final, is my feeling. So I want to be wrong, because I think Capello's been brilliant for them. I think he's been absolutely great, and I think, he does know what he's up to. But I just can't see it. I mean, please prove me wrong. I will be really pleased. I'm not anti-England at all. I love it. I absolutely, I'm not covering them while I'm out there because I thought a million other people are doing that.
So
There's no
you've
point.
got tickets for Paraguay?
I have got tickets. I've got a ticket for Italy, Paraguay. I'm going to a very strange selection of games. I'm going to South Korea, Greece. I'm going to go and see Paraguay, Italy. I'm going to see France, Mexico. Ghana, Australia, Ghana, Germany, Cameroon's Netherlands, which I slightly fear will be a dead game because it's the last one. They might have won both of them before that, and we'll see. And then I've got 2 rounds of 16. If England don't top their group, then I'll be at England's round of 16 game in Bloemfontein. And if not, it'll be whoever, and then one other round of 16. So they're rather an odd selection. I bought my tickets before I knew who'd qualified or anything. I just sort of went, right, this is roughly the route I'm going to go. And, do you know what I mean? Because I just thought, I've got to buy the tickets. Because I applied for tickets for 2006 in 2 different names and got nothing. And I think, that I just thought, I can't, if I do that again, I will never live with myself. So I just thought, buy weird tickets in strange places, you'll definitely get to see something. So that's my agenda.
So which African nation's going to get the furthest? You don't think it's
I've got a real soft spot for Ghana. I mean, I just thought Ghana at the African Nations Cup, no stars, the 5 best players were not playing for them. And they were really good. They were really disciplined, really together. And I think certainly getting a certain way in the World Cup, you can go so far on just being quite together and quite organised, like the Greeks in 2004. And I think of the African teams, they'll be the most together and most organised.
Half the Germans. Half the Germans.
The Germans are all organised. They are looking like pretty much the weakest German team I've seen since
They were the
2000.
weakest team in 2002, weren't they? They got great cards.
I know it's a cliche, but
No, they're good. They will be good. I mean, I think Ghana's going to squeeze through. I think they're going to squeeze through. It's a really tough group. Serbia, Australia, Germany. So all difficult. But that's such as there aren't that many easy. There's not that many easy ones if you're not Italy and New Zealand. So I don't think Cote d'Ivoire. Look at all the class in the team. I mean, just but every time they show up, it never quite happens. And at the African Nations Cup, they were pretty poor. So I don't know.
Portugal.
They got Portugal, Brazil, North Korea. So they've got to beat Portugal basically. That's quite tough. Algeria. I mean, my sense is they just lose their heads. They just go mad. And I just don't think I think against England, I think England and America will both beat them. So I don't give them much hope. South Africa, you've got to, I mean, the Confederations Cup last year, home support, they came good and they did really well. And that might be enough to get them into the second round. Which leaves us with Nigeria. I mean, who knows what Nigeria's going to show up? Nigeria 94 or Nigeria 2002? Nigeria 2002 could barely walk. I seem to recall. Their game against England was possibly the most boring game I've ever seen. 94, they were sensational. So who knows with Nigeria? I think, is that everyone? South Africa, Nigeria? Cameroon, a bit of a mystery to me, actually. I haven't watched a lot of them. A lot of, fantastic talent. Not an impossible group. They've been pretty good. I think they've been reasonably good. Maybe Cameroon, actually.
Yeah, but you said in your talk, World Cups always throw out new styles of football, and you sort of said, well, now the game's gone global, everyone plays the same stuff.
Yeah.
But the only reason I'm going to watch the World Cup is for the unexpected. You're going to get something that's going to stick in your memory, and it's going to come out of left field, and it's going to. So we're trying to predict it on what we already know. But the thing about the World Cup is about what you don't know. Yeah. I mean, you wax lyrical about Brazil. It was Brazil before anyone knew about it. And all of a sudden they come wham, and we all want to be like Tostado or Jairzinho. But it's going to happen the same sort of way. You're going to get the same wave of the new coming through, and all of a sudden, what we're talking about now is just going to be like.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I really hope so. I cherish the thought of uncertainty.
Maybe Japan have got 3 good goals on Sunday, didn't they? They should have done it.